Buonasera. I will continue in English, but we have Niccolò with us here, and he has promised he will summarize my arguments so that we are not losing too much time, and I will speak slowly so that all of you can follow. Let me say that I'm very happy to be here. It's a very impressive atmosphere. Of course, I know about the history of the university, but also the spirit that I feel that is bringing you here. And we heard the motto, and I think it is a motto, let's do our part, which is very necessary. Because communication of science to society for a long time has been along the lines, we know and we will tell you. And once you know, you will be with us. And we know this has not worked. This is why in many of our societies, we have people who are hostile even to science, who ignore science, who think science is mere opinion. And so it is very important to be aware we have to do our part, and this means both on the side of science, but also you as citizens doing your part. Now, I will speak, that's the question that I think can be a good starting point. What science can contribute to a meaningful life? Now, we all agree very quickly what is a meaningful life. We want to be in a condition where we don't have to fight for our existence. We want to give meaning to what we do in our work, but also in our relationships. We want to be surrounded by family, friends, be part of a community, and this is what we call culture. And science is part of this culture. If I say science does not give meaning, I mean the following. Science is based on values. And you heard Piero Angela in the beginning, he mentioned some of these values. He spoke about razionalità, he spoke about the mentalità scientifica. These are values. And unless these values are rooted in society, science will have a very difficult stand. So science needs these values that are in society that have to be nourished, like all values have to be nourished. Now, what does science do? It explores the world, first the physical world. You have Galileo's cathedra here. The social world, the world inside the natural world, and together with technology, it continues to transform our world. And this is my last sentence before I let Niccolò take the floor. It is society that enables science to do this. And then it's society's part to take it up, to appropriate it, to change the uses of technology. We cannot know everything in advance. That shapes it and gives meaning. So let's continue. I have chosen as an example something that all of you are concerned with, namely the latest developments in artificial intelligence, in particular the large language models, generative AI. And it's not just technology. It is this mixture of science and technology. It started way back in the last century, as we know, with Alan Turing, and you had a generation of scientists who were working on it, but we live in an age where we have technosciences, the very intricate relationship between technology and science. And so the question is, what are the challenges for a meaningful life in this digital age? And we have seen this dazzling performance of ChatGPT, and I'm sure many of you have tried it out because you were curious, or those who work in science have already been using it for some time. And the dazzling performance when ChatGPT was released last November has taken even experts by surprise. Very efficient, it makes mistakes, it has hallucinations, but very, very efficient. And it is more than the usual hype. By now, it is possible to generate new texts, new images, new sounds, but it is also possible to make deep fakes so that you no longer know whether the face you see, whether the voice you hear is truly the voice of this person that it pretends to be. So these are the two sides of it, but it is quite something, and it raises the question that perhaps some of you have been asking yourself, are we still in control? Now, this has obviously enormous potential in science, and it will be taken up and is already taken up in science very rapidly. The latest survey done by the journal Nature says 8% of working scientists are already using it. 8% of working scientists are already using generative AI and large language models. But as we know, there are a number of concerns and the uneasiness remains. The uneasiness, you know it all, it's about jobs, it's about the labor market, what will happen in the future. And during discussion, I can tell you a little bit more about what the latest estimates are. It's about these deep fakes and what happens to our democracy if you no longer can trust the institutions, the information you receive. Bias and discrimination has been with us through the internet and the way how we use data. But the basic question is, whom can we still trust? And once we no longer know whom we can trust, there's an erosion of our democracy. So we can summarize this uneasiness with this deep-seated fear of losing control. This is an old fear we have since we had automation, and this goes back, the term automaton is already mentioned by Herodot, and it refers to a tripod with wheels. So it's a very old fear that the machines can take over what humans do and that we may lose control. There are all the science fiction movies and science fiction stories about the machines taking over that many of you in this room probably know much better than I do. And there is also the fear that there are those behind these machines, namely the large international corporations that are getting control over us. So it's a broad spectrum of fears that are there of losing control. And this is something very essential because we come out of the age of modernity, which was all about being in control. We know there was also the illusion of control, but this just re-emphasizes how much this fear is there. And then, last but not least, there are our anthropomorphic tendency. Anthropomorphic tendency means we tend to see an object, we tend to attribute to an object that it has intentions, that it can act like a human being. And even if we know this is not the case, you speak to your computer or to your car when it does not function, you stupid think, as though it was a person. This is innocent in the way how we use this language. But it's no longer innocent when people are drawn into the communication with ChatGPT, for instance, because they are explicitly designed to make us believe that we are communicating with another human being. And this has implications, obviously, for people with mental health problems. And recently, there was the first suicide in Belgium This was not the latest generation of AI, but a previous one. This was a person with mental problems who was discussing with a therapeutic app, and the therapeutic app told him the best solution for your problems is if you end your life. So this is an extreme case, but nevertheless it shows how our anthropomorphic tendencies are a very important concern that we have to put into this picture. And let us not forget, and this is my last sentence, let us not forget, I was recently listening to an interesting discussion by Mustafa Suleyman he works for DeepMind, the research outfit in London. And he was telling the audience that very soon there will be a whole generation of PIs. Now, for a scientist in the room, this means PI is the principal investigator. But no, what he meant is a personalized intelligence. PI, personalized intelligence. This means you will have access to a device that can guide you, that predicts, that tells you what to do. It's like your best personal assistant, friend, counselor, whatever. And the implication is the more personalized our reality becomes, the less we have a common shared social reality. So I was speaking about the question, are we still in control? And now I have to speak about the illusion of control. And illusion is a tricky concept because those who are in an illusion don't realize they are in an illusion. An illusion only stops if there is a clash with reality. And then you wake up and you realize you have been in an illusion. So it's a tricky concept. On the other hand, control is part of what technology is all about. In every technical university, every engineering school, you learn how to control for errors. You learn that maintenance and repair are very important because you must make sure that it works, which is the way how a technology should function. It should work. So control is part of the way how technology works. But there has been, over time, an extension of control. In the 19th century, when industrialization began, people realized that it's not enough to make sure that the machine was functioning properly, be it a weaving machine, whatever the machine at the basis in the manufacturing factories was, but you also had to make sure that the workers working with the machine would not be killed by the machine or would not lose an arm. So the safety of workers became part of this extension of control. And since then, we have been extending control. We have extended it to the notion of health. We have so many regulations by now. We have, in medicine, you have various phases of trials that medicine has to undergo because it can, before it can reach the market and so on. We are now concerned, can we control the technology in terms of the environment? What do we do with all the plastic that is being produced? Needs to be recycled, but how? So we are expanding the notion of control. And now it comes to the difficult part, because with AI, it is not only the safety, health, and environment. It uses, by the way, AI uses a lot of energy, so there is an environmental impact built into the way how it's being produced. But also, what does it do to control the impact on our cognitive abilities in the labor market, our emotional health, just as the example that I mentioned before. And finally, there is the question, who controls those like Elon Musk and others, who have the illusion that they have illimitable power. And speaking about large corporations, since we are here in a university, I must also mention something that I think is very important to realize. The funding of research and development in OECD countries, on average, is 2/3 coming from the private sector and 1/3 from the public sector. In AI, it is 90% of the funding coming from the private sector. This means universities, basic research, and whatever is necessary to control what the large corporations do, have the problem: do we have enough computing power? Do we have access to all the data that we need? Do we have the possibility to train students that do not immediately join the corporations because the salary is higher, but that are needed also at the university? We understand only what we make is attributed to Giambattista Vico, 1711, who is the basis of Scienza Nuova, written later. And it's translated as verum factum, has become a kind of motto. We understand only what we make. And it has served everyone well. We understand only what we make. But now we have the problem: do we still understand what we make? Because we are increasingly living in a human-made world. Human-made world, when we speak about the Anthropocene, climate change, largely human-made, the depletion of natural resources and the consequences, largely human-made. But also we are in the situation where we can replicate, we can represent every object as a digital object. We can create a mirror world of the world that we have today. And what about the unintended consequences in this human-made world? And one of the important differences to other kinds of technologies is that we attribute agency to AI. Agency is a term, we discussed it before, which is difficult to translate, but it means that you confer the belief that the other one can act on its own behalf. And by doing this, we sometimes hear people saying, you know, AI understands me better than I do myself. How can an AI understand you better than you yourself? An AI does not understand anything. It does not know anything. It does not feel anything because it is a machine. It is programmed to do certain things. It fulfills functions that it has been designed to fulfill. So we are transcribing agency to the machine. And this means also in terms of prediction. Prediction is wonderful in science. It started with physics, making predictions, developing new concepts, making predictions and testing it. But in the social world, we use predictions all the time. When you look in your smartphone for information, where is the next restaurant, which book to buy or which clothes to buy, where to go on vacation, you get answers that are based on past data, but they predict what you're going to do. And in the social world, predictions can easily become self-fulfilling prophecies. The term was coined in the 1930s in the United States during the Depression, when the run on the bank started. So the rumor is spreading: get your money out of the bank because the bank will no longer be liquid, and everyone ran to the bank. And the bank was liquid even earlier than otherwise. And this self-fulfilling prophecy is something that limits our agency because we believe the prediction. Now I come to the last part, which will be shorter. What can we learn from science? And I want to start with the concept of uncertainty and embracing uncertainty. Because if science can teach us something, is that we should not be afraid of uncertainty. Science, and in particular basic science, thrives on uncertainty, because this is what is attractive, what you do not know as yet. You want to move into the territory of the unknown. And basic research is inherently uncertain because you do not know yet what you will find, and this is the beauty of doing it. And uncertainty means also something we can learn from science, because we live increasingly in a world that is becoming unpredictable. And this has to do with the fact that it is becoming more complex. And complex systems are known to be able to create phenomena, it's called emergence, that are based on the interconnections between the composing parts. And this can be a new phenomena, this can be something that nobody could predict. So emergence is part of complex systems. And therefore, we have to be prepared that both in the physical world, in the social world, we will have more of these unpredictable emergent phenomena. And if you look around, unfortunately, in the world today, in the last few days, we have seen quite a bit of, unfortunately, very tragic, unpredictable events that were happening. But science, what we can learn also is that science provides a space for curiosity. You have seen the little girl in the film when we started. Curiosity is the driving force, one of the driving forces of science, and we have to share it. Children are curious by nature. Then something happens when they go to school, as all the parents know, and they ask themselves, what happened to curiosity in my child? And we should ask ourselves, what happened to the space in which curiosity can thrive? Then recognition. Science, this is another mechanism that drives science. You recognize what your colleagues, with whom you cooperate, but you also compete with them. It's like in sports. You cooperate, but you also compete. But you recognize when there are good scientific results, good scientists around you, and you want to do like them or even to surpass them, which is the competitive element. And then there is excellence, and the European Research Council, the institution that I had the privilege to chair for a couple of years, stood and stands for scientific excellence only. But excellence is multidimensional. It's not something that you can just put a figure on it. It is multidimensional, and it is something that we can also learn from science, this multidimensionality. And last but not least, talent attracts talent. Where you have already a nucleus of a good research group, of good scientists, the students find out about it, and the students are attracted by it. The colleagues are attracted by it. They want to work there. And this talent attracts talents must also mean you attract more women and you value diversity. The challenges for Europe. I have not mentioned so far, when I spoke about the control of AI, the importance of regulation, because it is a topic that I cannot cover here as well. But it is very clear we must regulate AI. But it is very difficult because, as with every innovation, the law always lags behind. It's like Achille and the turtle. Innovation is always running ahead, and the law has difficulty in catching up. Nevertheless, it must be done. If it is too early, innovation is stifled. If it is too late, you can do nothing. So it's a very, very difficult way to do. And here Europe has been leading the way. The AI Act is a very reasonably good document for regulation. Much will depend on implementation, but Europe is at the forefront worldwide in terms of regulating AI, for instance, by putting facial recognition into the red zone, which means high risk, and it should de facto not be done. But we live in a global world, so there is Europe, there is the US with a very lax attitude towards regulation, and there is China, where the Chinese government, as an authoritarian government, decides what the regulation is. And I hope that Europe is able to convey some of the values that we are now trying out, and regulation will depend very much on implementation. And all the member states will have to do their share in getting this piece of regulation to do what it is supposed to do. Then we have a big opportunity to restructure our system of education. AI offers enormous opportunities, and especially in countries, and there are not few in Europe, where there is a lack of teachers and a lack of highly qualified teachers, where AI can fill the gap, but it has to be done in a very good way that needs still to be invented. So everyone has to do their part, but we have the opportunity to restructure the educational system. And of course, upskilling is necessary. Then we want to make Europe a place to attract and grow talent. And again, during my time at the European Research Council, it was always a bit heartbreaking to see that Italy has so many good scientists who got an ERC grant, but many of them did not work in Italy, but abroad. And so the message is very clear: something must be done to attract talent, to retain talent. And if you ask me what is my take-home message to you, you have this wonderful athlete, Tamberi, makes these wonderful high jumps. And I would say, raise the bar and fight against mediocrity. Thank you.